Hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and this is the video that I mentioned in the... Did I mention the Overwatch video? Actually, did I mention the Overwatch video? I think I said I had something coming on the docket in the Overwatch video, but I'm not sure if I was that specific as I would have been in the follow-up video that I recorded after the Overwatch video. But that's not relevant, because this is not the video I recorded after the Overwatch video. This is a brand new video. So, a little bit of backstory. When I was recording that night, I decided to do my Things Change Overwatch 2 video, because obviously my opinion on Overwatch 2 had changed. And I decided to do a similar video, albeit a less critical one, on Final Fantasy XIV. Now here's the thing. Just when I was about to release the Final Fantasy XIV video, I hadn't quite uploaded it yet even, I saw in my notifications on YouTube that the embargo on the Dawntrail Media Tour had lifted. So I went, you know what? If I'm going to be completely fair to Final Fantasy XIV, I feel like I should at least look at a little bit of the content, because I haven't watched a lot. I mostly watch Preach's videos. And I'm like, I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna watch these videos, and I'm gonna see, you know, what are they called now? Creative Unit 3 instead of Creative Business Unit 3? Not much different, but, and not a very creative name, all things considered. But either way, I wanted to see what Yoshi P was cooking. So I decided that I'm gonna watch it, and I didn't get a chance to watch him until this week because I'm not super busy, but there's a lot of things to watch and a lot of information to absorb and a lot of things to think about. So the end result is that I don't always have the time to just watch things right away when they come out. You know, it doesn't help, you know, being at work for 8 hours a day, especially now that, because like have I mentioned that I have a job now? A new job, rather? I have not, probably. I haven't done a channel update in 2 years. Anyway, but, what was I saying? But basically, you know, working 8 hours a day and everything, it means that I have extraordinarily limited time to actually, like watch YouTube videos and absorb and like look at the information I want to look at and so forth, and then record YouTube videos and the like. So anyway, I'm getting off track. My point is, I decided to watch some, you know, I decided to look into some of the content surrounding Dawntrail, and I realized something, that I can't release the original video that I made as it was, because realistically I was a little bit too harsh. Much harsher than I intended. It didn't help that, like I said last week, I was tired when I recorded the Overwatch and the 14 video, and that affected my opinion a little bit. You know, not substantially, but it affected my opinion a little bit. Because I'll tell you right now, back then I expressed a little more consternation and a little more concern about the future of Final Fantasy XIV. But having seen like everything that Yoshi P has said and what he's said in interviews and so forth, I'm a little more hopeful for the future of Final Fantasy XIV than I was a week ago. Now this doesn't change my perspective and opinion on Endwalker. I, in general, remain very, very deeply disappointed in Endwalker as an expansion and as a story. And I kind of want to talk about that, because of course, when Endwalker first released, what, 3.5 years ago, about now? 3 years ago, 3.5? I, of course, put a video on this channel that was literally just me rambling, as they usually are. But I put a video on this channel of me rambling and saying how much I loved Endwalker, how satisfying I found it and everything. And over time, I have become actually pretty negative about Endwalker. So I'm going to preface this real quick by saying that if you don't want your perspective on the story of Endwalker to be ruined, if you want to keep enjoying it, if you want to be happy with what you got, then you don't have to listen to me here. I'm not out to ruin things for other people. I will absolutely ruin your enjoyment of Star Wars, though. But when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV, I am much more okay with people who just kind of, who just kind of enjoyed the Endwalker story and everything, and I have no qualms about that. But I personally noticed that there were, even back when I made the original video praising Endwalker, I still had my issues with Endwalker, and I just noticed details. I noticed details in the overall, like in the overall storytelling of Endwalker that kind of just made me go, this is a little weird. And the main issue there actually was the portrayal of Hermes, who was very clearly just kind of a little depressed perhaps, but also an asshole and a jerk. And the game tried to treat him like he was sympathetic, even though he decided arbitrarily and completely on his own that he had the right, due to philosophical differences with the civilization, to become its judge, jury, and executioner. And that should rub anyone the wrong way, because he had no right to do that. And I noticed that right off the bat. I noticed that the game was trying to make him sympathetic, and I'm like, that's not right. I mean, if you want to sympathize, I mean, here's the thing. If you want to sympathize with Hermes, there's nothing wrong with that. But the game's trying to push you in that direction with the way they, formulated cutscenes and the way they kind of, treated Fandaniel and everything. They try to treat Hermes, as a sympathetic character. It's very, very off-putting. And then, maybe a year and a half ago, a little longer possibly, I ran across videos from a YouTube channel called Echoes of Atheris, which are basically long-format, literary analysis videos analyzing characters like Hermes, like the Na, like Emmet Selk, and so forth, and pointing out the very serious flaws in the storytelling surrounding these characters and how they are ultimately portrayed. And like I said, I'm not going to go deep in the details here, but in a lot of ways, I realized ultimately that the story in Endwalker was very, very disappointing, especially coming out of the highly nuanced, highly emotional, and the resonant story of Shadowbringers. I love Shadowbringers. I still love Shadowbringers. I still think Shadowbringers is the best story in Final Fantasy XIV by a margin. Huge margin. Shadowbringers over there. Everything else is kind of this way. A little bit. Heavensward's like more here. But regardless, my point is that, coming out of, stories like Heavensward and Shadowbringers, Endwalker is a lot more mediocre. And and some would even say downright bad. I'm not sure I would say Endwalker's bad, but it's definitely not good. Having looked at these analyses and so forth, I had definitely come to the conclusion that no, even Heavensward's story overall was a lot better than Endwalker's. And then you'd have to take into account the fact that Endwalker as an expansion really drops the ball for the most part. There's a lot of people, throughout this expansion, people are talking about things like game balance and the 2-minute meta. I don't particularly care about the 2-minute meta either way, but I can understand why other people do. I can understand why people think it's kind of dull, and even I low-key sometimes think it's kind of dull depending on what job I'm playing. I don't like to play, for example, this expansion, I don't like to play Bard at all. Even though I did play I didn't play a lot of Bard, but I would like to play Bard, it's like one of my off jobs. I haven't really played Dark Knight, and I love Dark Knight. I love Dark Knight aesthetically. I loved Dark Knight's gameplay loop before, and now it just kind of feels like crap. I haven't really played Paladin, even though I like Paladin's aesthetic, but I don't like its gameplay loop. There are several jobs that I have just not played at all because the way they've been designed and the way they've been balanced just doesn't feel very fun. There's the issue of the fact that the post-main story quest patches, the 13th storyline was very underwhelming and honestly I think very poorly done. A lot of people said, "Oh, they're setting up for something," and it's like, I'm sure they are, but it doesn't change the fact that these five patches, the story in the 5 patches, 6 patches. Actually, no, the 5 patches. The 6th patch was obviously set up for Dawntrail. But the story of the 5 patches just was... It started off promising, but then ended off very flat, very underwhelming. It felt like it took way too much from... Final Fantasy IV, but not in a transformative way. And it ended very abruptly. The Alliance raid, same thing. Starts off very promising, but it just ended very abruptly. You didn't really get to explore the characters of the 12 and everything. It was fun. It was undercooked, and I was very disappointed by it. I just, I think the only storyline realistically at Endwalker that was done well at all was, okay, Hildebrand was okay, but was the main raid series. But even that is kind of sort of dragged down by the fact that once you realize, or at least in my opinion, once you realize the story isn't that good, it gets a little dragged down by that because you don't get to enjoy it as thoroughly as you otherwise might. You don't get to enjoy your little denouement with Themis. Gosh, I forgot his name. I also forgot Elidibus. There we go. I got them both. I got both names. I got his name and his office. There we go. Whew, that was a close one. But yeah, it's like it doesn't feel as satisfying when everything else around it kind of feels like crap. And then, in general, the game development and all the content and everything is very underwhelming, right? It's like the variant dungeons seem very promising. I ended up barely doing them at all, even though it's like I might eventually come back to them, but it's just not something that really caught my fancy. And I didn't really have anyone to play them with, there wasn't. I'm not playing games as much with the people I'm friends with in the game, and I don't have a ton of friends to begin with. Even though I'm in a very active, I almost said Link Show like this is Final Fantasy XI. Even though I'm in a very active free company, I don't really participate with them a lot, so it's not something it's not something I really do all that much. And in general, it's like, the game doesn't seem like it has a lot of steam. I was talking the variant dungeons, of course. There was also Island Sanctuary. I would argue a lot of people were kind of down on it, but I would argue that it actually wasn't bad content, even though I haven't completed it yet. But again, that's also because I have barely played the game realistically in the past year. I've barely touched the game like I used to. Like, I have like 14,000 or so hours on the game, which sounds like a lot, but I guarantee you like 50 to 60% of the time was AFK time. I just wasn't actively playing the game. I was, cooking, or I was watching YouTube videos, waiting for queues to pop, stuff like that. But the Island Sanctuary though kind of reached a kind of another problem though, and a lot of people noticed that there was a lot less content to do with other people in this. Last expansion had Boja, expansion before that had Eureka, expansion before that had the thing they repurposed for Ishgard Restoration. Gosh, I forgot what it was called. Poop. Anyway, it's not important. The actual name is you know what it is. But this expansion, of course, just didn't have anything like that. The relic weapon was just a tombstone grind, and I'm someone who doesn't really like how I never liked how they designed grinding in this game, going all the way back to A Realm Reborn, because I dislike grinding that involves the tedious repetition of the exact same thing over and over again. It'd be one thing if, like, when you're playing like a fight, like it plays out a little differently than before, but when it's just the same thing, whether it's like, say you're fake grinding, and it's like, oh, you're just doing basically the same 5 fates, and then occasionally another 1 or 2 will pop up here and there, but then you're just rotating the same 5 fates, and it gets very dull. And those fates get dull because it's just killing the same enemies over and over again. They all spawn in the same spot, so you know predictably where to look to get the enemies. I find that dull. I find grinding trials to be kind of dull, because trials are rather long for the amount of reward they give you. Unless you can absolutely steamroll the trial in like 5 minutes. It's like, no, you're probably going to spend a solid 10 minutes or so, and a solid 8 to 10 minutes in there. You're going to get relatively minimal rewards, and you're going to be doing the same thing over and over again. I get bored doing stuff like that. Like just doing the dance that you have memorized. This is why Expert Roulette really is kind of boring too, because it's only ever 2 dungeons, which I still think that is a terrible design decision, and I'm very mad at Yoshi P for that one. back at Shadowbringers, turning, making it so only one dungeon releases every patch. It's like, no, we need more than that, I miss the hard mode dungeons, I miss being able to explore a little more of the world through dungeons. I kind of understand in a sense why they cut back on content. I understand why they cut back on that content, why they cut back on Endwalker's content, because of course they've been working on Final Fantasy XVI for the past 4 years. Well, not for the past 4 years, but they were working on it for the 4 years basically prior to Final Fantasy XVI's release, 3 or 4 years prior to Final Fantasy XVI's release. But I, broadly speaking, don't really consider that an excuse. I don't think that is, I don't think that is fair to the people who are playing the game, they're playing the game that has a monthly subscription. I don't think that's actually fair to those players. I think we deserved a little more than we got in Endwalker. I think we deserve a lot more than we got in Endwalker, honestly, because you have to really consider that anyone who's been playing the game roughly since A Realm Reborn released, not counting everything before that, but anyone who's been playing the game roughly since A Realm Reborn released have easily spent more than $1,000 on the game, not counting any sort of cash shop items they might have bought. And even I bought a few. I bought the Play Dead emote. I've bought, the Lunar Whale mount and all that stuff. No, wait, was Lunar Whale... Wait, was that Wait, no, that was pre-release. That was collector's edition content, wasn't it? Regardless, that's right. Regardless, same difference. Because also I've also pre-ordered every collector's edition for the game, So most people have spent over $1,000 on Final Fantasy XIV over its lifetime. Anyone who's a long-term player anyone who started before Stormblood probably has spent cleanly over $1,000 on the game in one way or another. And, I wouldn't say it feels like a slap in the face, that's too strong language, but it feels a little disappointing to be, to kind of be neglected by that. And it's very frustrating because it made me, for a time, and I'm still kind of there, it made me very unhappy with Final Fantasy XIV and how Final Fantasy XIV was handled and managed over the past 2.5 years, because it felt like they took their high watermark, because you have to remember, right before Endwalker released, right, there was all this hype. Everyone's super excited. They have this massive influx of players from World of Warcraft because, all the content creators and all the players are really bad at Blizzard. And they have every right to be, because Blizzard is an absolute dogshit company now. Didn't mean to swear there, but came out. But they have every right to be mad at Blizzard, so they came over to Final Fantasy XIV, at least for a time. Many of them have gone back to WoW, or have spread their horizons and started playing all sorts of other games instead of being locked into this one game that has, if we're being honest, has kind of fallen off over the years. But at the end of the day, Final Fantasy XIV was at its high watermark in the lead up to Endwalker, and it feels distinctly like they squandered that really badly. It feels like going into Dawntrail, the game should be in a much stronger place than it is. And it just wasn't. It just isn't in a strong place. I don't think it's in a weak place. I think that there's still a lot of love for the game, and I think that a lot of people are very excited for Endwalker. Dawntrail, excuse me. But at the same time, it could have been in a better place. It could have been in a place where, people were a little more excited, a little more hyped. People like me, for example, who want to be excited and want to be hyped for Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. Well, that is where we are. And here's the thing, though. I saw, as I mentioned at the beginning, I decided to look at all the embargoed content and look at some of that Pictomancer stuff, look at some of the Viper stuff. I've looked at everything. I haven't looked at that job trailer, but I've used the benchmark and everything. And you know what? I'm not down on the game. I'm a little more excited for Dawntrail than I was a couple of weeks ago. First of all, I love the graphical updates. I love the shadows. I love the lighting. All that stuff on its own for the graphical update is enough to make me go, "Oh, this looks amazing!" I'm actually really excited for that, because the game definitely has needed a facelift for a very long time, and it's good to see that it's getting that facelift. It's good to see that the game is going to, is going to look nicer. I've seen both versions of Lisha in the benchmark, and man, they're looking good. They're looking good. I'd like to see Elysin Lisha with the Lexentail's hair, which is not in the benchmark program, unfortunately. But otherwise, Bun Lisha and Elf Lisha look very good, and I'm very happy to see them. In a much nicer environment, as it were. I'm also, I can't say I'm particularly hyped for either of the jobs, but they don't look terrible either. I'll reserve judgment on the cartooniness of Pictomancer until I actually see it. I think I would have kind of preferred some of the more obscure pre-existing Final Fantasy jobs to maybe get a little more of a spotlight rather than something like Pictomancer, but I'm not going to complain either. I'm also, generally speaking, I'm actually pretty happy with some of the things I've been hearing from Yoshi P regarding the game's balancing and job, and the distinctiveness of the various jobs and the game's difficulty, because it did feel like Endwalker had a lot of very easy content too. I think it was very well made, but I think that a lot of the fights were just very easy to learn and very. And bear in mind, I also recognize that on some level, I've also gotten a lot better at the game than I used to be. I'm not the fresh-faced newbie from 2014. I'm definitely a lot better than I used to be, and I'm very good at figuring out how to maximize DPS. And if I'm playing one of my main jobs like Dragoon or Scholar, then I'm absolutely going to crush it every time. I'm not going to struggle playing, my best jobs. But I'm glad to see, though, that Yoshi P has seen a lot of the criticism that has come during the Endwalker era, and appears to have taken at least some of it, maybe not all of it, and you don't necessarily take all of it on board, because not all criticism is created equal. But I'm glad to see that he's taken at least some of it on board and is like, well, no, we're going to try and do better, and we're not going to be afraid to make slightly more difficult content that people ought to learn. Because I'll tell you right now, something that actually has disappointed me is that some of the older dungeon reworks and so forth, I'm a little disappointed at the oversimplification of some of the bosses. Like, I'm totally fine with, say, Copperbell Mines and them changing all the bosses in that, because that was a little convoluted and a little too complicated, and a lot of the changes, and a lot of the original design ended up being kind of pointless because no fight ever got designed like that ever again. And I'm totally fine with them changing some fights like that. But then there's others. I'm trying to think, because I know there was one that made me actually kind of mad because it made the fight less interesting, and a lot less interesting. I don't think it was Hawk Manor. I don't think it was Brave Flox's Long Stop, though I wasn't overly keen on the changes to the final boss on that one. No, was I? No, I think that one was fine. I think that was that one just added telegraphs. But there was a boss in there that was they added telegraphs to Cutter's Cry, right? And they added telegraphs to to some of the other later ones, and some of the earlier ones, and that didn't bother me as much. But there was one boss they really changed substantially, and it really irks the hell out of me, because the more complicated older version of it made for a way more compelling experience. And I understand why they changed it because of the duty support system, but I don't like it because it makes it less fun when you're just running it normally. And it just frustrates me, because it's keep some of the difficulty here. I want to have fun playing the game by being challenged and being forced to pay attention to the game and focused on my monitor, and not just being kind of, not even AFK, because I don't like watching Netflix at the same time as doing dungeons, so I will sometimes listen to videos in the background. But it's say I'm playing Ninja or something, and I don't play Ninja on a regular basis, so it takes a moment sometimes to remember the rotation and to start executing it properly. And so sometimes I'm hard staring at my hotbars down here, at the bottom of my monitor, and it's but it's more interesting sometimes when the game forces me to look at the fight while trying to do the thing too, because it kind of makes my brain, you know, reconnect synapses a little better, a little faster, you know. But anyway, back to it. I am glad though to see though that Yoshi P has taken at least some of this criticism on board and recognizes that, you know, if we're going to make a better game, then we have to make a sufficient challenge for all the mid-core players like myself. I want, you know, I'm broadly speaking a pretty mid-core player, you know, and I want more content for people in my difficulty bracket, because I don't do savage rating or anything. But I also really don't do much social stuff. I don't go to in-game venues like nightclubs and stuff, and I don't. Okay, I do. My glamour game, I honestly think is pretty much on point, but at the same time, I'm not like obsessed with glamour. Once I get a glamour that I think is solid, it's just my glamour for the foreseeable future. So it's like that. Anyway, all right, I've rambled long enough. I hope I got my points across clearly enough. Not necessarily clearly, but clearly enough. And I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like and a comment down below. I always appreciate comments. You know, I know that this is not the biggest channel in the world, but I do appreciate when I get at least 1 or 2 comments. You know, it's a little bit sad when a video just kind of sits there. It's like, oh, it's got, you know, 10 views and no one said anything. I do get a like or 2 though. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, everybody.